Hello, and welcome to the Say Yes to Holiness podcast. This is Christina Simmons, your host, and today I am very excited to have a special guest with me, James Baxter, who is the co-founder and CEO of Exodus 90. Now, some people might have heard of this, but I want to spend some time with James in order to kind of dispel some myths and also issue an invitation that's very, very important, not just to all the men out there, but particularly to all the wives and the families, and actually to the entire body of Christ. So, James, thank you so much for coming on to the show. I really appreciate it.
Christina, thank you so much. Thanks for the invitation, and I've been really looking forward to it.
It's super. So, would you mind kind of sharing with people a little bit about who you are, a little bit about your own journey, and how you kind of got to where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm from Indianapolis area in Indiana. I grew up in the northwest suburbs in a town called Zionsville, and had one brother, two parents who kind of came back to the faith when we were young. And I remember the impact that had upon their marriage and actually our relationships as well. So they encountered Jesus Christ through the Cursillo movement. Both of them had been baptized and, practiced their sacraments as kids, but it had really kind of fallen away and came back to the church through Cursillo. And it just left a huge impact upon our family dynamics. And really, really kind of set my brother and I up for an interesting life that we enjoy together now at Exodus. But I was very active in a high school boys serving fraternity called the Knights of the Holy Temple. And I say that because I ended up going to college seminary at the age of 18. And that seems young, but to be honest with you, my, it was kind of an extension of my time in high school, grounded in fraternity, growing in the contemplative life and serving at the holy altar with my peers. And the fraternity was like super important for my life and my formation because I went to a public school. So I never said a prayer at school until I went to the seminary. And I kind of loved that environment because I'm not from a very Catholic area at all. It's about 7% Catholic. So it kind of forced me to know my faith as well. And the fraternity really helped me sharpen the sword, I guess I would say.
Yeah.
I would end up going to seminary. I spent all of my college years there, went to the St. John Vianney College Seminary in St. Paul, Minnesota, which is on the campus of the University of St. Thomas. And it was just a total delight. Had a powerful experience with the men there. Really active on campus in the Catholic Studies program, which is really kind of where I had my intellectual conversion, I like to say. Really kind of coming to believe that the faith is the highest form of reasoning and that the cross is at the center of history. And as a result, all truths, if they are one, unite in the face of Christ. And as much as I had practiced the faith and felt like I knew Christ, that conversion of mind was really important for me. And it's definitely kind of set a trajectory for me as well. I'd go on to study theology at a Benedictine monastery in Southern Indiana called St. Meinrad. And I was there for a couple of years. And that's where I discerned that God was not calling me to priestly ministry. And from there, I'd kind of launch out and on this project that's kind of unfolded into Exodus. During that time, I got married. I've been married now for a little over 3 years, got 2 kids. So got a full life these days, got a son that's a little over 2, a daughter that is just a couple months. And my wife and I are really having a great time and learning how to be parents day by day.
Wonderful. Can very much identify with a lot of your own story. Our diocese, where we are, Diocese of Birmingham, where I am, is only 5% Catholic, but there's pockets of where it's like up to 6. Very much people are desiring formation so that they can respond. In our own family, my husband, he lived his Cursillo, and that was a huge turning point for him. And our youngest son was in the house at that time, and he describes about for him that experience of he knew, up to that point, he's like, In fact, I asked him one time, and talk about, being a little humbling. I asked him one time because he served all the way through high school. And I asked, how do you know that the Eucharist, because he would kind of get upset sometimes, and people would be irreverent, especially other altar servers. And I'd say, well, how do you know that it's real? And he said, well, Mom, I knew that you always believed. But he's like, but what was the difference was when Dad came back from this Curcio, and he said, and all of a sudden it was about us getting out the door 40 minutes before Mass so that we could be there half an hour early so Dad could be there praying. So in preparation for the Mass. And he said, that's when I knew that this was a real thing. And, and that's something of where um, I've always so I'm a former military officer, so I've always been in a very male dominated, environment, did a lot of different things, but it's something of where I've always known the power of the model and example of the man, especially as head of household. And, so that's something in my own ministry I've always tried to encourage. And that's why, something like Exodus 90, is such a huge gift to the church as a whole. But for a lot of people out there, can you describe Exodus 90 for people who might not be familiar?
Absolutely. Well, before I jump into that, it's awesome to
Sure.
hear that story about your husband's Curcio experience, and the fact that your son took notice, because that's literally what happened to my brother and I too.
Hmm.
So that's a real common thread. It's pretty
Hmm.
moving, honestly. But yeah, my dad, when he went through Curcio, he would tell us years later. We went on a hiking trip together, and we climbed a mountain, and at the top, we read some Psalms, and he's like, hey, and he was in tears. He was just like, what I received from Curcio was that I knew that it wasn't too late to pass on the faith to my sons.
Mm.
And I will never forget that moment, because, and even as a kid, after Curcio, every morning I would wake up and Dad was in the prayer chair, for 20,
Mhm.
30 minutes before work,
Right.
praying over the daily gospel,
Mhm.
going through some of those prayers, and just like really seared itself into my imagination. Like, that's how you begin your day. You begin your day
Mhm.
with God. So yeah,
Yeah.
really cool commonalities there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as far
Definitely.
as Exodus is concerned, yeah, it's Exodus 90 is a 90-day spiritual exercise for men. And we walk through the book of Exodus. We take on some prayer, ascetic, and fraternal commitments, all of which are about growing in freedom. So freedom's kind of the heart of the book of Exodus in so many ways. And it's, um, really what all of our work is about. And obviously the world has a kind of a vision for freedom that's very different, from a Catholic vision. And oftentimes it's just interpreted to be a license, an ability to do what you would like, whenever you'd like, with whoever you'd like, for how long you'd like. And
Mhm.
that's just not kind of what Christ models for us on the cross. And he was the most free um,
Mhm.
to ever live, right? And what does he show us? He shows us that to be free is to love God, and then to respond as fully as possible to his invitation. So
Mhm.
um, really our desire and our belief is by just kind of returning to some fundamentals of our faith, growing in prayer, growing in ascetic practice, and being accountable, and having the encouragement of a group of other men. You'll be more free to respond to your vocation. And for most of our guys who are married with young kids, it's really to become a better husband and a better father.
Mm. Absolutely wonderful. So what is the exact mission or deepest hope that you have for men who participate in Exodus 90?
Well, you kind of spoke to it a little bit earlier, actually. And I think every team and organization and ministry has a little bit of a secret that they tell over time, or it's kind of like what galvanizes them or what excites them. And that's why they're doing whatever they're doing. And for us, it's just the fact that, a father's faith is the greatest influence upon the life of a child in terms of whether or not they'll practice the faith as an adult.
Mhm.
And the studies on this are really clear, but not emphasized, I don't think, nearly enough. And they're not just in the States, they're throughout Europe as well. And, when a mother is practicing the faith and the father is not in a household, a child has a 2% chance of practicing the faith, 1 in 50, which is
Mhm.
just, it's just so low. But when a father is practicing the faith, sometimes even regardless of the faithfulness of the mother, those kids have a 2/3 to 3/4 chance of practicing the faith. That's 66 to 75% chance.
Mhm.
And it's just, when I read that for the first time, I was just struck, because first it was embedded in my own family of origin, and the brothers that cared,
Mhm.
100% of us are in the faith. The brothers that didn't, none of those kids are in the faith. And
Mm.
so it was true in my experience, but then also it just kind of bowled me over to realize, like, our work at Exodus is, insofar as we're returning men to the faith and helping maybe guys who had conversions to return to what they once knew, or guys who have not really had them before,
Mhm.
and kind of introducing them into this kind of new life in Christ. We're making a dent in the future of the church. And that's very
Mhm.
much how we look at, why we come to work every day, is just, hey, by forming men, we're influencing families and hopefully building up the church of the future. So,
Mhm.
in terms of what's the larger vision, or the higher call, that's that's what we're about. That's what we care about the most.
It's absolutely wonderful. I remember hearing those statistics that you had made mention of, given by Dr. Scott Hahn at the World Meeting of Families in Philadelphia. And it was something that I believe that was 2016, I want to say. Or no, it's 15, because that's when Pope Francis came. But it was just something of where it was so powerful to hear that. And for me, it was an encouragement, but also was a reaffirmation of what I had always had strived to do, which is, um, I'm a very capable woman, but it's something of where it was just like one of the most freeing things for me was to encounter the teachings of John Paul II, Theology of the Body, and the
Yeah.
fact of we are to complement, not to take over. And that was one of the things that, as a woman, it was so freeing to hear the fact of I don't have to be the man. I don't
Yeah.
have to do all of those things. Rather, by being fully woman, I am complementing and I'm helping, my husband or my brothers, or, to be able to become who God created them to be. And I think that's really where our society really misses the boat, is that we speak about, come on the female side of, as a woman, you can do anything, you can, do, be and anyone, etc. And the fact is that it's not a limitation to be fully woman. Rather, it is, we will be scientists, we will be, whatever it is, in a different way, because we're women. Just like guys are going to be differently. And that's one of the great graces that we have. But absolutely wonderful. And I'm so glad that you're doing the work that you're doing. So the most common time that you guys do Exodus 90 is leading during and leading up to Lent. So, in fact, I think it starts, on January 17th. So
That's right.
Monday, January 17th. And so, but how is this time, a little bit special or more or different from participating in Exodus 90 at other times of the year?
Yeah. So this whole 90-day to Easter phenomenon was not actually something that we thought through. So this whole thing was a seminary formation program that was going on, year round. And it wasn't even a formal program through the seminary. It was just a priest friend of mine trying to
Mhm.
help out a couple young men that he was mentoring, basically. And so, so we had launched it, and, basically the thought was, okay, if we need this formation, what about men who don't have a formation house, but have a high task,
Mhm.
as husbands and fathers, and
Mhm.
as, as men in the world. And so that kind of question really struck me, because when I had been in the college seminary, the priests would regularly talk about how they wanted to build this second dorm where, laymen could come in and experience formation for their own
Mhm.
tasks. And so I was like, kind of combined the two things. And I was like, hey, what if Exodus is a place to do something like that? It just really kind of captivated my imagination. And 7 years later, still has it captivated, and I'm as excited for the future as I ever was.
Mhm.
But this 90 days to Easter thing was not our idea. So we had started sharing it in 2016, late 2015, early 2016. The next year rolls around, and we had a couple hundred guys in our first year. But 90 Days to Easter 2017, we had like over 1,000 guys sign up in a couple days time. And it was so dramatically different from the past that I thought it was a joke. Like I thought someone was messing with me or whatever.
Mhm.
And I didn't even look into it really for a couple days. And then I realized like, oh no, like the guys that had been through it the first year had an experience that they appreciated so much that they shared it with other men in their lives.
Mhm.
And we've been growing that way ever since. And so what makes the January time so special, and obviously the start date fluctates with wherever
Mhm.
Easter falls, is that, you're kind of, it's typically coupled with some New Year's resolutions desires that a
Mhm.
lot of folks share. And, but it really allows you to kind of begin. And then halfway through day 45 is Ash Wednesday
Mhm.
every year, which it actually took me a couple of years to notice that. But so by the time Lent rolls around, you're really kind of in this kind of ascetic, and penitential spirit already. And it really just allows you to enter, I think, into that powerfully beautiful time in the liturgical calendar. And that
Mhm.
ultimately culminates, in the drama of Passion Week and, Easter Sunday. So that's really kind of what we observe. At the same time, we do see guys that begin at different points, throughout the year. Probably the second largest date to end is Christmas. We've seen guys starting in the fall, but yeah, January time, and it was really time we see a lot of Exodus action.
Mm. Wonderful. So I was going to say, so you enter into this 90-day experience, and I work with people in order to cultivate the habits that they need to be able to live that holistic, integrated life, daily life. And so after this 90-day experience, what is there after? In other words, they've entered into this, and what kind of support might be available for men who want to continue, this journey?
Yeah, it's
Mhm.
an awesome question because, we really don't look at day 91 as a finish line. It's
Right.
like, no, these 3 months are about hopefully either extending habits you already have or building some that you don't have, as it relates to the practice of prayer and asceticism and community. And then we hope that men will kind of carry some of that forward, really into the future. Maybe not as intense, but something. Kind of another belief of ours is like this life we're living is like fundamental to Christianity. Like it's not
Mhm.
something we're inventing. It's not something we're, we've trademarked or something. It's like, no, like these are fundamental values to the Christian life,
Mhm.
modeled perfectly by Christ, and our fathers and mothers in the faith. And so, that's really what we hope for, is that this is kind of a, trajectory altering time.
Mhm.
We've spent years building out kind of our ongoing journeys. So we actually have a whole biblical series now for men where they can continue their journey through the
Okay.
biblical stories with the same, but a little bit different, a little more realistic and less challenging, I would say, kind of prayer,
Mhm.
ascetic, and fraternal components. And so that's kind of one of the ways in which men can continue. We also kind of
Mhm.
publish a lot of different content for guys at different stages and looking for different things in their own masculine faith formation.
Mm. Wonderful. And I love the fact that you just made reference to masculine faith formation. And there really is a difference in how it is that men and women journey on the journey on the path, the Camino, as we are making our way. And it's not that we can't, of course, walk together, and that there aren't commonalities, but there are some differences. And to be attentive to them is a beautiful thing. Just a quick question. So if a guy, or a wife who's listening, and she mentioned to her husband, "Hey, do this," but he doesn't know of other guys around, how might he be able to go through Exodus 90?
Yeah, so Exodus is really not about kind of a self-help experience, though
Hmm.
I'm sure there's a place for that somewhere. It's just not
Hmm.
ours. Ours is really about
Right.
building fraternities. And the reason
Hmm.
for that is, in a fraternity setting, like of other good men that are seeking holiness, you're going to find guys who are just like you, that struggle, with sins and vices that keep them from God. And because of that, there's a lot of encouragement and mercy in that space when you're really honest with them. At the
Hmm.
same time, you also need a standard, and you need someone to keep you accountable. You need someone to remind you when, you're not living up to a commitment that you've made.
Right.
Whether that's a part of Exodus or different entirely. It's just important to have a place where you're just totally in the light and not getting away with anything. I think men really need that in a particular way. And that's what Exodus fraternities are for.
Mhm.
So, I would just say, if you can't find a fraternity, um, don't rush it. Don't force it.
Mhm.
We're playing the long game over here. We'll be here next year.
Mhm.
But we always like guys to really think through, okay, who are some men in the parish? Who are some men in the neighborhood or at the workplace who might be open to something like this?
Mhm.
And you might be surprised at who says yes. A lot of our guys are practicing Catholics, but a growing contingencies of guys are not.
Mhm.
But they take it up because they've been invited, and there's something in this kind of challenge component that's speaking to them,
Mhm.
which is pretty interesting. So there's a powerful opportunity for evangelization within this whole thing.
Mhm.
At the same time, I will make note, one of the things we've been building towards for a couple of years is really kind of launching a feature within our application to find a fraternity near you for an in-person group.
Mhm.
Because it can be challenging to find groups. This is something we've heard literally from day one when we
Right.
started. And so we're excited to take some of that burden on ourselves and try to do some of that pairing. And that's actually coming out by the time this is published.
Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful to hear, especially in our world that is getting increasingly smaller through online connections. It's beautiful to be able to use them in order to connect with one another. So, kind of a little bit, kind of going back to your journey and how this has helped you. But what have you found to be the most challenging and rewarding in your journey with sharing Exodus 90 with others?
That is an awesome question. Yeah. So I think the most rewarding part of it is definitely the stories.
Mm,
And there was a couple times, especially early on in the first couple years, where we're still trying to figure things out, and we didn't really have a lot of traction or really much to show for what we were trying to do. And yeah, I was definitely on the verge of quitting, a number of different times and going to get a real job. And someone would just share their story with me, and it helped. And every one of those examples that I'm thinking of, and I'm thinking of faces right now,
Mhm,
it wasn't just their story that they were sharing. It was, they were representing that there were other men out there that I needed and our team needed to persevere in order to reach. So I would
mhm,
just say, in terms of the rewarding dimension, I think that's definitely it.
mhm,
Um, in terms of the challenge, I mean, you're up against, when you're doing spiritual work, and especially when you're focused on, I think, men's formation,
mhm,
and we think about kind of the ways in which over the last number of decades, fatherhood and men's formation has
mhm,
been both like subtly and pretty explicitly um, eroded,
mhm,
in so many ways. Yeah, I mean, you're going up against big forces that really dislike what you're about. And so, over here, we take spiritual warfare really seriously. All our fraternities end their meetings with the St. Michael prayer. And
mhm,
he's a patron of ours for sure, because there's times in which things are going on that are just like not of
mhm,
human origin, but fortunately for us, we've just really kind of gotten into a habit of really seeing things in those terms,
mhm,
and just kind of trusting that, God will carry us through those challenges, and his will be done, and whatever it is, we're in his hands as his sons, and it's for our greatest good and the greatest good of the idea as well. I've just
mhm,
observed that so many times,
mhm.
um, over the last number of years.
Yeah. So maybe why I am so passionate about journeying with my brothers and supporting them is because Saint Michael is my patron, and so
That's awesome.
Saint Michael always will step in for the battle. What's been one idea or habit or practice that has been key for you to live out the life that God created you for?
Yeah, so I'd call this like a foundation kind of, let me just say this, like pre-prayer in the morning. So
Hmm.
I'm a really big believer that we're pretty complicated if we're honest with ourselves. Like, there's a lot that goes on internally. And you've mentioned this a couple times actually, about kind of a holistic integration. And I'm really passionate about this as well.
Hmm.
And so for me, when I wake up in the morning, I really try to take time, 15, 20 minutes in silence, kind of pre-prayer in a way, to just kind of take account, like, how am I doing? What am I thinking about? What am I feeling? What am I anxious about? Where are all the parts of me in this? And once I have that situated and I've really kind of listened, kind of on a natural level, it kind of sets a really strong foundation for prayer. Some of the things, I don't know if you hear this, Christina, but it's just like the question of discernment is a pretty common one. Like, how do I know if this is God or this is me? And I definitely had those kinds of questions in the past too. And I found like real breakthroughs for me internally and in the spiritual life when I kind of made separate time for both, natural level, how am I doing today? And then, okay, entering into dialogues with the Father, with the Son, with the Holy Spirit, my favorite saints, the Blessed Virgin Mary, etc. It's a small thing, and there's no magic bullet to it. It's really primarily about listening more than anything. But I've just found it to be so helpful, over the last probably 5 years or so. This was not something I was doing in the seminary that has really helped me since.
Yeah, wonderful. Good advice for people to listen to. So just a little bit of fun. What might be your favorite book, movie, or TV show?
Book, movie, or TV show? Gosh, I must confess, Bitcoin is probably my favorite subject or hobby to read about right now.
That's okay.
So I've been doing a lot of Bitcoin reading on the side. My wife is like one. So I get fascinated by topics and then I just read them from like every angle I can find.
Right.
And most of the time it's like 2 or 3 month benders. And it's like, I don't know, I've gone dives into art history and architecture and all this stuff. And my wife's really wondering when this Bitcoin one will end, but I'm about a year into it and still still learning a lot. So I'll say that for now.
Okay. So if you're stranded on a desert island, what 3 things would you want to have with you?
Oh gosh. Things, not people.
Yeah. So if you're stranded on a desert island, then you're probably, you're the
Okay,
only
all
one
by
there.
myself. All right. I'd say the Bible is one thing for sure. I'd say, man, my golf clubs, so I could hit some golf balls around the desert. I'm a big golfer.
What'd
Some
you
way
get the
to.
handicap down to?
I was scratched back in the day. I'm not anymore though. I'm probably, I don't know, 5'6".
Okay.
But I'd say my last thing is some way to keep in touch with how my beloved Indianapolis Colts are doing. I'm a huge Colts fan.
Okay. And final piece then for you. If you could go back in time and share one piece of advice with your younger self, what would it be?
Oh man. Yeah, I think I'd tell myself, yeah, like everybody, I think there's been times where I'm like, oh my gosh, what is going on? Is this going to work out? Do I need to try harder or whatever? I just tell myself like, hey, through baptism, you became a son in the Son, our Lord Jesus Christ. And like everything because of that is working for your greatest good, just because you're persevering and loving him. And I think that would have reduced some stress in the past.
Awesome. Beautiful. Just kind of gave me little goosebumps all over when you shared that. Thank you. So for anyone who's interested, where might they be able to learn more about Exodus 90 or even get in touch with you to find out more?
Absolutely, Christina. Well, hey, thank you again so much for having me to find out more about Exodus 90. Just go to exodus90.com. That's exodus90.com. And we've got really everything you could want to know about how all of our programming works, including Exodus 90. And if you're hearing this in the short term and want to get started and join tens of thousands of men and all around the world, journeying through the book of Exodus, you can sign up and give it a shot.
Wonderful. I'll definitely put it in the show notes so that people are able to find it there. But James, it has been such a pleasure and a joy to be able to spend time with you today and to have this conversation. And for everyone who is listening out there, whether or not you are a guy or not, if you know of a guy in your life and you truly love them and you want the best for them, share this invitation for them to check out Exodus 90 because it truly is transformative. And that's what we're about at Say Yes to Holiness, is striving to do whatever it takes so that we can tell the master of death, not today. Thanks everybody for joining us, and God bless.